Hi everybody, it's Az here from Heel vs Babyface with another episode of AzChats and a very special episode today of AzChats. If you don't know what AzChats is all about, what it is, it's more podcasty than a video. It's fuel for your ears as opposed to fuel for your eyes. So if you want to go off and do something, pump up the volume in the background, go do some dishes, mow some gardens, tup some ewes, do whatever you want. But it's something for you to listen to as opposed to actually physically watch. And the reason why it's so special today is I'm going to be discussing the new WoW expansion. I'm going to be giving my thoughts on where I think we're going to go. I'm also going to give my thoughts and feelings on some of the elements of content that we're actually going to see. And if you've been a long time follower of my live streaming, twitch.tv/Heel vs Babyface, plug, then you'll know that over the course of the last few months, I have actually given my opinion on at least where I think the next expansion is going to be set. Over the course of the recent weeks and recent months, I've kept quiet because I know, or at least I knew, that I was going to be producing a video of this kind of ilk. Now, there was a lot of speculation that arose with the Dark Below, Blizzard trademarking the Dark Below, and it turned out to be a wee bit of a hoax, which kind of made people think, are we going to see a Shara and all that kind of jazz? But I have always maintained, and I predict, and I will go on the record right now and say that we are definitely returning to Draenor, or at least fragments of Draenor. And this seems to have been confirmed over the course of the last week. It's something that I've always said when I've been questioned about the new expansion, and I'll give my reasons why, and not just kind of jump on the bandwagon because of the announcement of the trademarking of Warlords of Draenor. Now, the reason why I think so is because both Cataclysm and Mr. Pandaria have been heavily set in Azeroth. And I think it's time just to break that up, to physically move away from Azeroth once again because of the nature of the physical appearance more than anything. Because when you're on Azeroth, you can only have a certain aesthetic going around the place. If you go to Hyjal, for instance, it has to fit with the rest of Azeroth. And yes, they are trying to do their various tweaks to it. So yes, we do have the corruption, of course, by the Twilight Cult. We do have plenty of areas that have been destroyed by fires, etc. But it physically has to still fit in with the other remaining areas of Azeroth itself. The same can be said of the Twilight Highlands. It's again very kind of similar Azerothian aesthetic, but if there's that wee bit of the Twilight mix to it. Corrupted areas, nice areas, and it kind of, again, all has to fit in. When the Burning Crusade came out, and when we actually left Azeroth for the very first time and ended up on a fragment of Draenor, if you do not know the story or the lore behind it, Outland is allegedly the largest fragment of the Shattered World of Draenor, which is the Orc homeworld, as opposed to the Draenei homeworld. It was the Draenei that named it Draenor. Draenor was a word for something like exile's hope, something like that. I don't know. But it was the Orcs adopted the name because the Orcs just called it World or something like that. And the Draenor who settled there, who were, I don't know what you'd like to call them, because they were running away from the Burning Legion, so they were exiles. Yeah, they were exiles, and they decided to actually set up shop on what would become Draenor. But the Orcs were very placid back then. They were a shamanistic race, and they weren't bloodmongers. There was a deal that was made between, I think it was Gul'dan and the Burning Legion. I think it was Manaroth. If I'm getting all my lore wrong, whatever, do apologise. But I'm just kind of, from what I can remember without Googling it and all that kind of jazz. And they made a deal with the Burning Legion, and they turned them into bloodthirsty, crazy, flipping you know, nut jobs that we know the orcs to be today. Is that a fair assumption? There's like a load of orcs just looking at me now like, you bastard. So when we actually physically went away from Azeroth onto Outland, they had license to be as creative as they possibly wanted to be. And of course, the first thing that you're struck with when you arrive on Outland is how incredibly different the zones are. Whether you love them or loathe them, they are exceptionally well designed. I always used to hate Blade Edge Mountains when I first started to play Burning Crusade. Now it's one of my favourite aesthetic looking zones. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous, especially when you're flying above it and you can physically see all the spikes kind of flying out and all the dragons impaled on the spikes and yada 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 yada. My favourite zone of Outland, it'll come as no surprise to a lot of people because I am a warlock, is Shadow Moon Valley. There's that massive fell looking area, and then we've got Taroka Forest, and we've got Nagrand and Zangarmarsh, and there's another storm, and of course Hellfire Peninsula. So there's plenty of little zones within Outland, and they each have their own unique aesthetic. What I'm going to go on record again and predict is we're not going to one fragment of Draenor, we're going to multiple fragments of Draenor. If Outland is to be the largest fragment, I would think that we're going to go to at least 2 different fragments of Draenor. And the reason why I reckon this is because I think the level cap is going to go to 100. And I'll say this for a very specific reason. Not just because the heirloom items that drop from Garrosh, but because of what is on them. Now, if Blizzard, and they have put that those heirloom weapons will be available from level 90 up to level 100. If Blizzard set the level cap of the next X-Pack to level 85, it shows exactly how lazy the development of the game is getting, because they're basically saying, we don't have to make any weapons for you for the new 2 X-Packs, because you'll be using the heirloom item, which you can get through doing either flexible raiding, normal raiding, or looking for aid. Therefore, when the new X-Packs hit, there will be a lot of people with the heirloom weapon. A lot of people, considering how popular flexible raiding has actually become. So if they dare set the level cap at 95, and therefore we have a weapon that's going to take us through not just the next X-Pack which is going to be announced, but the X-Pack after, then that's just boring. Absolutely boring that you're going to be lumbered with the same weapon in the levelling up process, not at endgame, but in the levelling up process, going from 90 through to 100. So if Blizzard are going to set the level cap at 95 for the next X-Pack, it kind of shows exactly how kind of lazy and how little they truly care about proper development within the leveling system, because the leveling system in Mists was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. The quests themselves were dull, boring, very unimaginative, little in diversity, and I think Blizzard, if they are to make leveling relevant again, have to go back to the 10 level stages where we can develop a lot more story. They said they were worried in Wrath of the Lich King that we got to see too much of Arthas before we actually hit Icecrown Citadel. I say absolutely not. In fact, to me, what it did is it cemented the storyline in Wrath of the Lich King itself. We got to see a lot of Arthas and we didn't get to see a lot of Illidan. And I thought the addition of Arthas in quite a few areas of the levelling up process absolutely aided and absolutely became a wonderful element of the storytelling process. We never forgot who the villain was, and we never forgot how nasty he had become. And I'll refer you to the Wrathgate incident, which is absolutely incredible if you have watched that. The guy was lost. We have to understand that, and it must be drilled into us, and it was wonderful that they did it. So when we finally arrived at Icecrown Citadel, we were absolutely stoked to attack. Now, if Blizzard do fall back on the fact that said within 10 levels we got to see too much of Arthas, then I call bullshit as well, because we have seen a hell of a lot of Garrosh in Mists of Pandaria, who of course turned out to be the main villain of the piece. We saw him throughout the whole of it, so his interaction within the story element, whether it be through patch 5.1 or other means, was instrumental as well. So I think the addition of having the villain come in at set pieces throughout the leveling up process reaffirms why we're in the expansion, who we're after, and what cause we are actually on. There was no doubt in our minds that Arthas needed to be put down. There was no way that he was ever going to redeem himself. The only way that he could redeem himself is through us physically destroying Frostmourne. And that was what happened, and Tyrael destroyed Frostmourne. And it was all great fun, and we all had mead and sweetmeats and stuff. Yes, okay. Moving on. So, I think a 10 level upgrade in the next expansion is absolutely vital. I think we need to bring that element of true storytelling back, and we also need to bring that true element of leveling meaning something. In its current format, it means nothing, and they might as well just disband the leveling process completely anyway. Stick everybody at maximum level when the X-Pack starts, and then begin with the storytelling elements of questing through that manner. Otherwise, we're just going to get the mess that we did, the boring, drab, dull leveling up process which we had in Mists of Pandaria. So what I'm predicting with the various fragments of Draenor is I believe the Warlords of Draenor, if it is to be the name of the next X-Pack, and the likelihood is it is, we are going to be dealing with potentially different clans on different fragments. Draenor, of course, used to have all its different clans when they exploded. Who's to say the clans did not survive on the various fragments? So we could, for instance, start off on one fragment of Draenor and go from level 90 to 93. We could then move to another fragment of Draenor and move from 94 up to 96. And then the final fragment of Draenor, another fragment at least of Draenor, and maybe go from 97 to 100. It would also make the leveling up process rather exciting, keep all the environments unique and fresh, and once more give Blizzard the license to be as creative as humanly possible when it comes to these zones, and I think it might just invigorate a lot of people who have been disillusioned with the World of Warcraft during the last two X-Packs, not just Mists, but also Cataclysm, which did turn out to be rather a drab affair as well. I think people are really looking for Blizzard to show that love which they showed in the game back in Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and of course the amazing vanilla, which I never got to experience personally, but the stories I hear, they make me lament it, even though I didn't. But because I joined in Burning Crusade, I saw a lot of the aspects of what was vanilla WoW, and how difficult and how cool it was to actually live up, etc, etc. But I'm maybe just getting a little bit off track here. Expect 2 new races instead of one homogenized race. I don't think the experiment of having a homogenized race with Pandarans actually worked. And to be quite frank, again, it kind of showed a lack of imagination with Mists of Pandaria. If anything, Mists of Pandaria should have had 3 races to choose from. The Alliance should have had the Jinyan, because that's the one which they sent us on the storyline for. The Horde should have had the Hosen, and then of course you had the Pandaran as well, so you could choose whether or not your Pandaran went to Horde or Alliance. This would show a little bit of diversity within Mists, and it would also give a little bit more creativity when it came to the various races. Alas, that did not happen. We just got pandas. It was a very dull and boring race to choose from if you weren't into Pandarans, and I understand that there are at least 3 people out there who were. So I'm only joking, there was about 5. But there were some people who were interested in the Pandaran race, but if you weren't, that was it. You were lumbered. It was just like TS, tough shit. And so unfortunately you didn't have a lot of diversity when it came to choice, but if they had added the Jinyan, if they had added the Hosen, then at least it would have allowed a little bit more creativity if you were going to choose a new race. So why that wasn't implemented, I don't know again. But in the new X-Pack, expect 2 new races, and I'm actually going to call one here on the video as well. I'm going to call Ogres becoming a playable race. Absolutely so. Where they're going to go for the Horde or the Alliance, I can't say at this moment in time. I'm leaning more to them being Horde-esque, But because of the Alliance always kind of getting the cutesy side of things, yes, they had the Worgen, which was amazing, and the Horde got the Goblins. That basically just, though, kind of leveled up Orcs, in my eyes, because the feral nature of Worgen against the feral nature of the Orcs, and then, of course, the Goblins and Gnomes kind of traded off as the cutesy races on each other as well. But I call that Ogres will be a playable race. Now then, if they are to go to the Horde, then I call Ewoks to be the Alliance version. Yeah, if the Horde though do get Ogres, and they do decide to go cutesy again with Alliance, oh my god, they might as well just give them Ewoks, for goodness sake. So I would hope, maybe, the Ogres would go to the Alliance side, even though I do think they're going to the Horde side. But the Ogres would go to the Alliance side, and then the Horde will get something maybe of equal ferocity. But I think the Ogres could be an exceptionally cool looking race. Again, they're rather big. You could have the customization of a one-headed Ogre, or if you're a spellcaster, you could potentially have a two-headed Ogre. If Blizzard would allow that, that would be absolutely sensational. They could kit them out brilliantly in armors as well. We wouldn't have the issue that we would with Naggers, even though I think Naggers would be such an amazing race, Blizzard. So there is an aspect of me that wish we're not going to Draenor, and of course just so Naggers can become playable races. But I digress once more. So yes, I'm calling that Ogres will be a playable race. Don't, though, get your hopes up for another class. I'm not actually convinced myself that we're going to get one. The Monk class has been very difficult for Blizzard to balance. What they did with the Monk class was absolutely the anti what they did with the Death Knight class. When the Death Knight class came out, they came out more powerful than Jesus smoking crack. They were that strong, and then they started to lure them and lure them and nerf them and nerf them until they're a more palatable race. They're still exceptionally strong now, especially in PvP, but I wouldn't say they're OP to a degree. I mean, soloing, I can't talk, I'm a goddamn warlock, but you know what I mean. They're not like head and shoulders above like priests have been in PvP for the whole of this X-Pack, stuff like that. I think they're in a very good place, and you know, all good stuff to them. But with Monks, they made them way too weak, and they came out an absolute damp squib of a class, because they do require a lot of skill to play. It's not just an easy pick up and play class. There was plenty of elements of that to learn. So somebody that could get to grips with the Monk class could do various good things with them, but the vast majority, and rightfully so, because you know, not everyone has that technical wizardry to work out exactly what they should do with a brand new class. And if anyone thinks they should, you're wrong. And that's just wrong, full stop. Give people a chance, for goodness sake. They came out way too weak, and they've been a nightmare to balance. Even now, coming towards the end of Mists of Pandaria, and we don't know how much we've got left of them this patch, and also patch 5 point whatever it's going to be, which will lead us into the new X-Pack. We could still be playing Mists for another 6 to 8 months, heaven forbid, but that could be how long we play this X-Pack for on top of today's date. And they're just getting to a position now where Monks are kind of getting there, sort of getting there, maybe getting there. So you have to bear in mind, if they are to bring a new class into the game, how on earth are they going to do it when they haven't even managed to sort out the existing brand new class, which they brought in the last X-Pack? Now, that's not to say they won't introduce a new class, and they could potentially have been sitting on it for a while and ready to release, but I wouldn't say get your hopes up too much. If there was one thing which I wouldn't be surprised being left out of the announcement for the new X-Pack at BlizzCon, it would be that there is no current new class, with the potential maybe to introduce one during the actual expansion, should the storyline lead through to it. Of course, if they were to introduce a new class, what would it be? Well, who knows? Because if we're going to go to somewhere like Draenor, it could be absolutely anything. But I would say don't get your hopes up too much. I'm calling that Blizzard have been lying about character models. They said recently, the last month or two, that they're only 25% ready. Blizz, I'm sorry, I'm calling bullshit on that. The reason why I'm calling bullshit on that is there are 11 races in the game at the moment. They're not going to redo Pandarans. They're the latest race and they look absolutely fantastic, whether or not you like or dislike them. Their features are very good, their animations are very good, the texturing, etc, etc. Everything is absolutely spot on with them. And then we go to the Worgens and the Goblins. Again, they are very highly detailed races. I doubt that we'd see any tweaks to them. Yes, of course, we would see a tweak to the Worgen human model because of the changes that would be made to the human model. So if we take those 3 races out of the equation, we are left with 8 races. Do the Draenei and do the Blood Elf need updating? Yes, I absolutely think so, and I would include them in the 8. So if Blizzard are saying they're only 25% done, which means they would have done 2 out of the 8 races over the course of the last 2 years, I'm sorry, I call bullshit. I predict that they will announce a complete range of races in the next X-Pack ready to go. And if they don't, they are shooting themselves in the foot. Blizz, World of Warcraft needs to be freshened up. You've lost 25%. You've lost a quarter of your customer base in the last year alone. People are becoming disillusioned with the game. People are moving on for whatever reason, whether or not they were disillusioned or not. They are simply moving away to other avenues. If they got a graphical overhaul on the character models, made them look sexier, made them look up to date, made them look a lot more playable, I just have to push you towards the brand new model of Garrosh Hellscream, that could quite easily pique people's interest to return to the World of Warcraft. Have a look at them, give them a try. Wow, my human female doesn't look like she's put all the food that she's eaten over the course of the last 6 years in her thighs alone, and of course her tits, because they're like massive, and nowhere else. They are complete and utterly disproportionate, and the way they move is ridiculous now. But it is a 10-year-old game, so if Blizzard do not announce that all character models will be available on launch, I think they're shooting themselves in the foot. The only way that I can explain them not to do this would be greed. And the greed would be that they filter the character models in the hope that people will purchase race changes to get the latest models. If they do release, for argument's sake, Dwarf and Human as the first 2 races to be upgraded, with other races upgrading later on, or let's just say Dwarf and Orc, so we've got one for the Horde and one for the Alliance, then they may hope that people will start paying for faction race changes, not faction changes, well, potentially faction changes as well, I suppose, but race changes, and try and cash in on them. If they do that, I again think they are shooting themselves in the foot. It will be very transparent what they're attempting to do, and if you tell me that with the creative force that Blizzard have behind it, they are not or able to get more than 2 races ready in a year, bearing in mind we're talking about WoW here, we're not talking about Skyrim, we're not talking about the Xbox One, PS4 latest generation of game character model, we're talking about a 10-year-old game that needs to have its character models brought into 2013. Oh, yeah. So again, I will call BS if they say, no, we haven't got them ready and they will be filtered out. So I predict, rightly or wrongly, that they will have all the character models available for launch of the next X-Pack as a key selling feature of the new X-Pack 2. Also, do not be surprised if Blizzard make the big decision to separate PvE and PvP. It has been slightly hinted at in recent weeks. We all know that Mr. Pandaria, if you have experienced PvP, has suffered from the biggest imbalance in PvP that this game has ever seen. If you look, for instance, at priests in 2s, was it 20 85% of all representation of 2's players were priests, leaving 10 classes out of the 11 to make up the remaining 75%. That is absolutely ludicrous and does show that priests were obviously and blatantly OP with their healing in that type of environment. But it was so difficult to balance because you start tweaking with PvP abilities, you start to mess with the PvE ability behind it. Bear in mind that the World of Warcraft started as a PvE only game. Battlegrounds started to filter through in vanilla after launch. It wasn't a feature of launch, it was a feature that they decided to introduce. Now, that's not to say that they should focus fully on PvE by any stretch, because PvP has become so exceptionally popular. But what to me it does mean is they need to separate the two. I think it would be a very bold decision by Blizzard. I think it'd be a very brave decision by Blizzard. But I've also got to look at the financial ramifications behind it as well from a logical point of view. Project Titan has been delayed. Now, we don't know if that delay is true. We don't know if that delay is brought about because whatever they were working on was just not looking up to par. We don't even know if the delay is actually code for, look, we've panned it, we've absolutely canned it. We've seen other games that were announced at E3, QuakeCon, etc., and they are going to blow what we were planning out of the water. I only have to point you towards things like Division, where you have this third-person shooter, RPG, MMO, multiplayer, all wrapped up in one. It could be absolutely sensational and start to bring in a new age of MMORPGs that don't focus on the fantasy world. I don't think a game like the World of Warcraft, it was released today, would be anywhere near as successful as it has been, because it hit the market at the right time within the developing game marketplace. Nowadays, people's avenues are changing. We've got Titanfall as well. We've got Watch Dogs coming out. Again, another vast MMO RPG element to it. Huge aspect to it. It's meant to be bigger than the map in GTA 5. So there's lots of exciting things which people are going to get their mitts on. If Blizzard thought Project Titan wasn't even going to hold a candle to these games, then yes, it probably is the right decision to pan it and can it, but what else generates you money on the meantime? It means that Blizz have to focus on World of Warcraft potentially being their big cash cow again. It's held them up for 10 years. They're bringing out Hearthstone. They're making probably good money from Hearthstone. We've got Heroes of the Storm, of course, coming up as well, which is their MOBA. We're going to see a lot of that at BlizzCon 2. But are those games going to generate the kind of money that the World of Warcraft is? I doubt it. Therefore, they have to focus on some brave decisions if World of Warcraft is to carry Blizzard forward for the next 3 or 4 years or so, until they get Project Titan back on track, redesign it, rejig it, whatever they're going to do to it, but put it into a position where they do want to show us something. If that is the case, then PvP and PvE have got to be sorted, because people are only going to get more frustrated with imbalance, they're only going to get more frustrated with the gulf between classes, and the only way that they can genuinely start to balance these things is to separate them. If Blizzard do make this brave decision, and I'm going to call that they do, I think we're going to see a fourth spec, allegedly fourth spec, brought in. Not so much as it's going to be a PvP spec. So we're still going to have our PvE specs, and then we're going to have a PvP spec, at least one. Something like that. I mean, I don't know how they're going to work it, but it will be separated. We're going to see an item crunch. I can absolutely call that down to the ground. I think that the numbers, the big increase in numbers, is playing a big role on imbalances as well. And it's also the gulf between the item level gaps from the beginning of Mists of Pandaria to the end of Mists of Pandaria has been absolutely colossal. If again you watch my live streams, twitch.co.uk, twitch.tv even, /Hill versus Babyface, then you've seen me do, you know, millions in damage when it comes to using Chaos Bolts crits and Shadowburn crits and things like that. I call that there will be a number crunch that will bring things down into a more manageable amount. This may also, of course, allow them to have a little bit more control when it comes to balance as well. But that has yet to be seen. We shall absolutely see. But I do call that we will be getting a number crunch. So if I do 1,000,000 damage now, I could potentially be doing 1,000 damage in the next X-Pack. Doesn't mean I'm going to be weaker by any stretch of the imagination. You'll still be able to kill stuff as quickly as you do now in the next X-Pack. You're just not going to see those massive numbers. But I am convinced that some third-party company will create an add-on that will allow you to see them as they should have been intended to be seen. And I will be doing crits of, I don't know, 35 million on my Chaos Bolts in the future and stuff like that. But yeah, I call a item crunch in the next X-Pack 2. Also, don't be surprised if you start to see some crappy content still. I don't believe that Blizzard, for some reason or other, have finished with trying to ram scenarios down our throat. They've called heroic scenarios a success. I absolutely disagree 100%. I don't think heroic scenarios have been a success. I think that heroic scenarios have been a very good way for us to get Valor in an expansion where Valor has been very difficult to get, and there are two massive gulfs between the difference of content being good and the rewards for content being good. Just because you tag on an excellent reward to crap content does not make that content a success and does not make that content any good. Sadly, Blizzard seem to think so. So I wouldn't be surprised if you do get to see a lot more of the dreadful scenarios in Mists of Pandaria. I would love to see it ditched, and I'm sorry, but don't have any hope whatsoever to see Looking for Raid removed from the game either. This is something which is probably the most divisive element of the World of Warcraft at the moment, but I still believe Blizzard want to keep it in the game for that really uber casual player that only has 3 minutes to play WoW because they have 15 children and they work 26 years a week. Yes, well, at least that's what they put in the forums. Now, I do expect, though, there to be the rise of dungeons again. I think one thing that Blizzard totally understood that they lost the plot with in Mists of Pandaria was the lack of dungeons and the lack of quality content outside of raiding. There was nothing really to challenge us outside of raiding in Mists of Pandaria. All the world content and even the instance content that wasn't raiding was absolutely piss drivel easy, and they never added any more dungeons into the game, which of course just made them more and more and more simplistic. Once more, if you follow me on YouTube, if you've watched my videos on YouTube and also my live streaming, you would have seen that I have soloed on my Warlock every single solitary heroic dungeon in Mists of Pandaria, and also the vast majority of them with absolute ease. In actual fact, I am failing to think of one where I had too much of an issue with, full stop, and that is sad, but true. So do expect Blizz to return to giving us back some dungeons. They gave us the absolute bullshit excuse in the forums that if they do create more dungeons, then that takes more bosses off raid. So if a raid was going to have 14 bosses, if we want to have a dungeon, that would only go down to 12 bosses. If we wanted 2 dungeons, it would go down to 10 bosses. Bullshit. It's all about managing their money, managing their resources, and they were quite happy to probably put more money into the shareholders at the time than they would into the game to maximize the profits. They absolutely can still produce big content with having dungeons. Why? Because we've had Wrath of the Lich King and Wrath of the Lich King 100% proved that. We had Icecrown Citadel, we had 3 dungeons. We had the huge nature of Ulduar, but that still didn't stop us from getting Tok very soon afterwards. There was that element there, so they absolutely have the resources and the manpower to do so. It's their decision, not the resource decision, whether or not they choose to do so. So please, please, don't piss on us and tell us it's raining. Just tell us some absolute truths once in a while. Wouldn't be a bad thing. Yes, we can do it, but we're actually deciding not to do it is the truthful answer to that. So do expect more dungeons to come in, potentially in the form of patches that will update the difficulty level of the dungeons and hopefully keep them more fresh. Now, as regards to storyline, etc., etc., if we are going to Draenor, if we are going to fragments of Draenor, and also if we are, then of course it does bring and hearken to the fact that the Burning Legion will play a big element in this. The Warlords may refer to the various Orc factions that are scattered around the remaining fragments, but that doesn't mean that the Burning Legion can't be on there as well, and it doesn't mean that the Burning Legion can't be at war with them. So yes, there is a certain gentleman who we have yet to fight from the Burning Legion. Do I need to say his name? So guys, say it. There you go, I whispered his name, if you didn't hear. I expect him to be the ultimate villain of the new X-Pack. I'm going to call it Warlords of Draenor. I'm going to call it that it will be called Warlords of Draenor. I do think that is going to be the expansion name, even though it does sound like a drain cleaner. So I'm going to bullet point what I've just been through. I reckon it's going to take us to fragments of Draenor. I believe we're going to get 2 new races, and I've actually called that one of them will be playable ogres. I think that the new character models will be introduced to the new X-Pack. I also believe that they will separate PvE from PvP. I predict the level cap will go from 90 to 100, with more focus on storyline being developed through the questing system. I also predict more crap like scenarios and proving grounds and stuff like that, because I don't know why, but Blizzard seem to put that into it. I predict that the rise of dungeons will once more come back into the World of Warcraft. I also predict that there will not be a new class added to the next X-Pack, or if a new class is brought into the next X-Pack, then don't expect it to be available on launch. Expect it to come in patch, I don't know, 6.2, something like that. So this, of course, is my prediction. I could be 100% wrong. I could be 1% right, 99% wrong. I could be 100% right, etc., etc., etc. This is pure speculation based on me just playing the game, having fun, reading forums, getting people's feedback, my own personal gut feeling as well. I would love to hear yours in the description, in the comments below. So please, bullet point what you think are going to be the key features of the next X-Pack. Did I also say separation of PvE and PvP? If I didn't, I believe that will also be brought in the new X-Pack as well. So bullet point in the comments below what you think will be the key features of the new X-Pack. Where do you think we're going to go? Do you think it is Warlords of Draenor? Do you think it is going to be Ashara? Etc, etc, etc. I'd love to hear it. But of course, everyone's opinion, by the way, can I just say this for the record, is valid. Don't bullshit anyone. Don't call bullshit on anyone. Let their imagination run wild. You want to let your imagination run wild? You post in the comments the most bizarre things which are going on in your head which you believe the next X-Pack of the World of Warcraft will be. I would still be intrigued to read all that. And I hope you've enjoyed the latest episode of AzChats. Please do like, comment and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook and also twitch.tv/Hill versus Babyface for live streaming. I shall be back tomorrow with a plethora of new stuff, and that does include people who've been loving the Let's Play Batman Arkham Origins, Arkham. The Let's Play Batman Arkham Origins. You're going to get a big ass episode tomorrow to catch up with everything. I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Night night.